Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by Speedstream. I'm Jim Cardle. Sid Miller was always one of the top 10 most conservative members as a representative in the Texas House of Representatives, and he is now the Republican nominee for Texas Ag Commissioner. As a nurseryman, a horse and farm man, he is faced with issues in immigration, EPA overreach, and things concerning the future of Texas. We're glad to be able to visit today with candidate Sid Miller, Republican nominee for Ag Commissioner. Sid, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Jim. Thanks for having me back.
I mentioned a couple things in there. I should add you were former chairman of the House Homeland Security and Public Safety Committee.
Yes, sir.
The House Agriculture and Livestock Committee.
Yes, sir.
We'll get to agricultural issues in a minute per se here, but let me ask you first, if I can, give us a quick thumbnail of what the Ag Commission Office does and what your purview is.
Texas Department of Agriculture actually touches the lives of everyone, and a lot of times you might not realize that, especially someone that lives in an urban area. But there's not a mother or wife that doesn't want the most affordable, safest, abundant, reliable food source possible for their family, and that's a big part of what the Texas Department of Agriculture does. But also that same housewife or father, when they pull up to a fuel pump and they buy 10 gallons of fuel, they can be assured that they're getting that has been calibrated by the Texas Department of Agriculture. The department's over all weights and measures. If you buy and sell gold, you can be sure that you get an ounce of gold when you buy it in Texas. If you weigh semi-trucks, big trucks, or if you buy 10 pounds of produce at the local grocery store, all of those scales are certified by the Texas Department of Agriculture. And every mother or grandmother or parent wants to make sure that their child has the most and best meals possible that when they go to our public schools, and that's one of the biggest things that the Texas Department of Agriculture does is oversee the childhood nutritional programs. It's passed through about a $2 billion program. It's passed through from the federal government. Also, adult feeding programs like Meals on Wheels, those are all overseen. So childhood nutrition, nutrition in general is big in the Department of Agriculture. But when some of the obvious things, when you go to the store and you buy a gallon of organic milk, you be assured that the Texas Department of Agriculture has certified that there's no antibiotics or hormones in that milk. Or you pick up a carton of eggs that doesn't have any E. coli or salmonella in it. And it's some obscure things you wouldn't think about. But the Texas Department of Agriculture is responsible for bringing and distributing infrastructure throughout rural Texas. Broadband, it comes under broadband distribution, comes to the Texas Department of Agriculture. Economic community upgrades, like infrastructure grants for counties and cities come through the Texas Department of Agriculture. Rural health care is a big part. Bringing rural health care, pass-through programs, grant programs for our rural hospitals and community health clinics come through there. So it goes on and on and on. There's a lot of things. Immigration's big. We have a lot of farm and ranch land on the border. For me, if I'm fortunate enough to get for the people to elect me their next agriculture commissioner, water is going to be a big issue with me. I mean, we're at a critical point in our state's history. For years and years we could water ourselves with windmills. We were sparsely populated. Those days are long gone. We have over 26 million people in the state now, and more coming every day. So we're going to have to start managing the water we have. And it's critical because agriculture is the largest consumer of water in the state.
Well, let me stop you there. I'm not going to take the bait and ask you too many questions about organic milk, at least not this time. But let's talk, if we can, speaking of weights and measures, a weighty issue, number one issue on everyone's mind right now is immigration, the situation down on the Texas border with Governor Perry taking some steps here in the last week or so. But it's got to be affecting South Texas communities, cities, farms and ranches. What are you hearing? Tell us if you've got any plans or if there'd be any purview of your department should, as you said, be elected. And what are you hearing about the immigration situation right now?
Well, it's something we've known about. Governor Perry alerted the current administration, Barack Obama administration, 2 years ago.
And I should mention, you were one of the first to call on Governor Perry to take the step to send additional forces down there.
Called on Governor Perry to put troops on the border. Several months ago, he's done that. Glad to see that happening, but there's more things that need to happen for us to secure that border. But we need to address the immediate need right now because we have a crisis down there. We have an invasion on Texas soil. First thing, I would call on Congress, and I was up there last week meeting with the Texas delegation, asking them to reverse the 2008 law that gives automatic asylum to these children from these South American countries. At the very minimum, it needs to be at least as tough as asylum for someone from Mexico or Canada.
Okay.
We need to stop that because right now, basically the way the law is written, we have to take them.
What's the mood of the Texas delegation?
They're for it, and they're working on it. John Carter is filing legislation to do that. The next thing that needs to happen is all the foreign aid that we're giving to these South American countries needs to stop until they can control their own borders. And that money needs to be diverted to the Texas border to help pay and for the expenses ongoing down there, like processing and expedite the process and run these kids through and getting them back to their home county. We need to use that money here until those countries comply and control their own borders. We should cut that off. Probably with the exception of we need to keep our drug enforcement policies going down there because that affects our kids.
I know the numbers are astronomical, 200,000 total, 59,000 children.
It's huge. I would call on the Barack Obama administration to reverse their policy of not allowing federal agents on federal land. Right now, the Border Patrol cannot patrol the border if it's in a federal park. I know we need to protect the rocks and the birds, but we need to protect our country first, so we need to allow our federal agents in there to patrol those. Right now, they have to patrol the perimeter of the park and not the actual border. So that's another burden that we can avoid.
So
it would increase a force multiplier where we could help secure that border.
So the Obama administration were to send National Guards, they would be then on state lands, I guess, or private lands, but not on national park lands.
Can't put them in. And there's a lot of federal land in New Mexico, Arizona, and California. We have very little in Texas, but we do have on our border the Big Bend National Park, which is off limits to patrolling. That's just not good management. I got my last idea from Congressman Gomer, and he pointed out to me that we should invoke on the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, and it talks about the federal government has the sole responsibility of securing our border, protecting our people, with one, in the last sentence, that is an exception.
Okay.
If a state is invaded or attacked, those rights also revert to the state to take matters into their own hands. Now that Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution has never been used before, but our Founding Fathers put that in there for a reason. I would say we are under an invasion on the Texas border. I mean, just the sheer numbers. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the legal definition of invasion is, but in its cowboy's definition, we're being invaded down there. They're coming over in such overwhelming numbers that we can't control it all.
How about in particular, pertaining to the Ag Commission, the Farm Bureau, the Southwest cattle raisers? What are you hearing from them? Some real life instances where there's problematic nature to this invasion, if you want to call it that.
I'll give you one example. Brooks County, which is not on the border, but it has a checkpoint station in it.
Okay.
It's 2 counties in, so it doesn't really qualify for a lot of the money that's going to protect the border. They have had so many deaths, bodies found coming through Brooks County, dehydration, and the expense that sparsely populated county has incurred. That county's budget now, they have had to lay off all of their law enforcement officials. They have 1 deputy for 10,000 square miles, that whole county, because so much of their county budget is going to deal with the hospitalization, the burying, and tracking the records, and finding family members of these bodies. We've since 2006 we've had over 50,000 murders on the Texas-Mexican border. That's 10 times the casualties from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm. Number you don't hear very often. Again, folks, I want to thank you for joining us. We're visiting today with former State Representative Sid Miller from House District 59. He's now the Republican nominee for the Ag Commissioner of Texas. Representative, let me get off of the immigration if I can. Appreciate your responsiveness there, and get into a couple other issues. I know last time you were in, a couple months ago, we talked about the waters, lakes, dry creeks, bar ditches, and the EPA's attempt to take over control of those. There's also a situation up, a lot of folks are familiar with, on the Red River, the migration by natural causes in the Oklahoma and Texas border. But do you know anything in that regard on the Bureau of Land Management, another federal overreach? Can you address that subject, perhaps?
You know, Jim, as I travel around the state, I talk a lot about water.
Okay.
And we were in a 4-year drought, and it's very critical, and we're going to do some things to work on that in the Texas Department of Agriculture.
Drought of record.
Drought of record. So I often get at my town hall meetings, people ask me, what's the greatest threat to the American farmer and rancher? And of course they expect me to talk about the drought and the water shortage. And that is a problem. But God's going to bless us someday, and our rivers and lakes will again be full, and that problem will be solved.
Okay.
The greatest threat, bar none, to the American farmer and rancher is our overreaching federal government, whether it be the EPA or the BLM or any of those other three-lettered federal agencies. We have recently, and I was the first one to own this, the BLM announced that they were going to seize 90,000 acres of farm and ranch land on the Red River a few months back in April. We went up there, we confronted them. There's no intention to reimburse or pay for this land, even though it's patented land. Those farmers and ranchers have been paying taxes on it. It's deeded. It's been bought and sold. Some of it has mortgages on it. We think now that they are backing off that somewhat. They're trying to figure out how to get, you know, they don't want the cheese. They just want out of the trap now, hopefully.
Okay, and you're talking about a literal land grab here.
It was a federal land grab,
okay,
with zero compensation. And this goes back to an older case that happened back in the 80s. And there might be a good shot that even that rancher can get his land back, hopefully. Then we have the other problem of the EPA. They're trying to usurp the Supreme Court ruling on the Clean Waters Act. They're trying to usurp Congress. In 2006, the case before the Supreme Court said that the EPA only had jurisdiction on waters that were in rivers, lakes, streams, and oceans. That's about 40% of the water.
Okay.
The other 60%, it's a state's rights. States manages that and oversees that. They're trying to usurp that by rule, but just by making a new rule that they lay claim to all the water. If it ever hits any kind of stream, a cow track, or a dry bar ditch, or an arroyo, or if it's a wetlands, or
and you're
whatever.
Talking about a rancher or farmer's ability to put pesticides, do any type of management.
You will not be able. It will put production agriculture out of business. It'll put our oil and gas industry out of business, because you just cannot comply with all the regulations you need if you want to build a stock tank to water your livestock, or you want to build a new irrigation channel to water your crops. Luckily, the comment period was to end this month in July.
Okay.
It has been extended till October, and I would encourage all your listeners to go to the EPA website and make a comment on that. We cannot allow that to happen in Texas, much less the United States. It would greatly hamper our ability to produce our nation's food. And agriculture, you may think I'm a little extreme, but it's a matter of national security. If we get to where the point in our nation where we're dependent on some other nation for our food, we will lose all of our freedoms, because they will completely control us at that time.
Well, Representative, speaking of usurping, I'm not going to usurp any more of your time. You're nice enough to come by while on the campaign trail here to Texas Insider headquarters. We appreciate you coming by and hope you'll come back again.
We do. I appreciate it. And I'm just gonna leave you a thought. I'm not a big supporter of ethanol subsidies. You know, one of the farm groups won't support me because of that. The rest of them do. But just something to think about. I just think it's inherently wrong to take good corn whiskey and pour it in your fuel tank. You shouldn't be doing that.
We'll talk about that in future visits with you. Folks, State Representative and Agriculture Commission nominee on the Republican ticket, Sid Miller. Be sure and go to millerfortexas.com to learn more. Sid, we appreciate you coming by.
Jim. Thank you very much.
Folks, you be sure to turn in for future editions of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by Speedstream. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle. Thanks for joining us.